Good afternoon and welcome to the latest in our series of live careers webinars brought to you by HOP, which is the Hertfordshire Opportunities Portal, which is a website that's been created predominantly for young people and students at schools and colleges in Hertfordshire to help you with lots of careers information. Now, the purpose of these webinars is to give you the opportunity to hear directly from an expert from a particular field, and which is probably a field that you have got some interest in and may want to find out a little bit more, because this could be a job that you're doing in a few years' time. So today our webinar is going to focus on careers in sports broadcasting, and a man who knows a thing or two about sports broadcasting, Rob Daly, is our panelist today. So good afternoon, Rob.
Hello, Gareth. Hello, everyone. Lovely to be here.
Let me just give you a bit of housekeeping before we get started. So we can't see or hear any of you that are watching us. First of all, those of you that are watching this session live, so it's Thursday at 4:30, well done for coming home from school or college and for logging into this webinar and investing a bit of time to find out about a future career. So Rob will tell you all about his career, but you've got the opportunity to ask him your questions, which might help you make those next steps or decide whether sports broadcasting is something that you really want to go into. So do use the opportunity to ask Rob those questions. The way that you do that, on your dashboard, you've got a questions tab. If you click that and open it out, it will provide a text box. You can type your question in there, that comes through. It's only visible to me, and then I can direct that question to Rob. So do take the opportunity to get your questions through to Rob. In the next hour or so, we are going to cover what sports broadcasting is, the different strands of it, how you might get into it, the different courses or qualifications or subjects that you might want to choose, and we'll find out what's really enjoyable about the job, and we'll also find out from Rob what are the things that maybe you don't know that you might want to know that is worth knowing a little bit more about as well. So as I said, make the most of the fact that you've got Rob here. You can ask him your own questions, so do that via the questions tab. The session is being recorded, so if you can't stay with us throughout the session, or if you have to leave, or if you've got any friends or family members that you think might want to watch this back, it will be available via the HOP website, probably from some point tomorrow, where you can look at this one or indeed any of the other previous careers webinars that we have run over the last year or so. Let me hand over to Rob first of all, and I'm going to get him to just give you a very brief biography of his career to date. So Rob, good afternoon. Tell us a little bit about how you've ended up in a sports broadcasting role.
Okay, so I left, I did my A-levels, and then rather than going immediately to uni, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. So I thought I wanted to do journalism. So I spent a year doing part-time work and getting work experience being a journalist. And then I did do a journalism degree. I did broadcast journalism at Leeds. And I predominantly, at the start of my career, so I came out of university in 2008, although I was already working as a journalist before officially qualifying because I'd made connections doing work experience. And then I did local radio, mainly I was a news journalist, doing a little bit of football on the side. And then from about sort of 2010 onwards, I phased out all the news work, and I had enough football work because I'm a freelancer. So that means I work for myself and just offer myself to people for work if they need cover, or a commentator for something, as I do now. So I've gone from mainly being a news journalist I went from news journalist, sports journalist, and now predominantly I do football commentary, which is a very specific part of the industry.
Sure. And tell us, who do you commentate for? So where might people have heard your voice?
Well, if there's any Spurs fans watching, they might recognise my voice. Maybe I don't commentate like this. This is my normal voice. I do change my voice slightly for commentary, but on Spurs TV, I do Spurs TV. That's the club's own TV channel kind of thing. And then I work for a TV channel in Ireland called Premier Sports. You guys probably don't have that coverage unless you've got a sort of a dodgy box getting an illegal feed into your house. But I do the sort of 3 p.m. Premier League game over there. And then I'll work for the Bundesliga, which is the German football league. They have their own TV coverage, which Sky Sports use in this country. So I was on Sky on Saturday night doing Bayern Munich's game, and then Talk Sport and a few others. So like I said before, I'm freelance. So I have about 5 or 6 clients that I predominantly work for.
Okay, thank you. And then tell us about some of the sort of wider broadcast work that you do. I know you did some work during the European Championships. Was that for UEFA?
Yeah, so as well as doing my commentary, I do a bit of presenting. I used to do a lot more presenting, and was doing presenting on on TalkSport, which is a radio station based in London, a sports radio station. But I've not really been doing too much of that recently. I've been mainly doing the commentary, but on Champions League nights, I work for UEFA, who are, you know, the European football body who run the Champions League, and they've got their own radio show for the Champions League. So I host that most nights of the competition. Sadly, I don't get to go to the games. We're not flying around to Paris and Munich and all these glamorous things. We do it from a studio in London, but it's still great fun. 5 hours live radio. Live broadcasting is my favorite thing. It's exhilarating and nerve-wracking. Yeah, so that UEFA, I forgot to mention them actually, Gareth. It's good you said that. They're one of my other major clients as well. I've worked for them for nearly 15 years now, actually.
Sure, thank you. And I've got to say as well that in doing, I think, 50 of these webinars now, you're our first Twitter blue tick panelist. So.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, that was yeah, I did a thing for Twitter at the start of the Euros, actually. Twitter would try, if anyone who uses Twitter, that Twitter were trialing, and they still have it, this thing called Spaces, which is it's like live radio. So you just have two Twitter users talk to each other, and then off the back of it, they emailed and said, "We'll give you a blue tick." And I was like, "Yes, about time."
There you go. So Rob Daly, Twitter blue tick panelist for you. So do get your questions into Rob. As you've heard from his resume there, he's got a whole host of experiences, very much current ones as well, commentating and broadcasting. So I've got a number of questions that I'm going to ask, and these have largely come from the questions that you submitted when you registered to come and attend this webinar today. So we'll cover most of these things here. So first of all, I just want to find out, you've mentioned some of the branches of sports broadcasting earlier, Rob, but could you just give us an overview, sort of fairly concisely, of the different roles within sports broadcasting?
Yeah, there are many different roles, you know, sort of in front of camera or on mic or behind the scenes. You know, you have people who you don't see in terms of the output of a sports broadcast. It might be cameramen, it might be editors, it might be producers, it might be runners, which is sort of the job you'll start off doing if you try and get into the industry. That's where you're doing really basic things like printing scripts and making drinks for the crew and that kind of thing. But eventually they'll get you doing more complicated things and show you how things work. And that's how you become an assistant producer, a director, etc. behind the scenes. So editors as well, you know, they're important people. They cut the highlights together, or they might roll the highlights in live while you're watching a football match and stuff like that. I mean, I'm only talking about TV here. And then in terms of on-air talent, as it's known, you have things like newsreaders, people who do pitch side interviews, interviewing journalists. You have football commentators like myself, you have presenters, you have pundits. There are a myriad of different roles. And someone I was saying to you earlier in the week, Gareth, was that the industry, I don't know what people think, you know, the people watching this, whether it seems quite a distant and impenetrable industry to get into, that sports broadcasting seems far away. You see it on your TV and you see these, you know, glamorous Premier League high-end matches or whatever. But the industry is actually quite accessible, quite big, and there's lots of opportunities in it. And if you think, well, I love sports broadcasting, but I could never imagine myself being a commentator or presenter, you might love being a producer or an editor or a cameraman or something else behind the scenes. If you just want to get close to sport, which is what I did, I just wanted to be, you know, close to sport as possible, having not really been apt enough to be an athlete myself, then there's loads of different ways into the industry.
Sure, okay, well, that's encouraging to know. I'm sure we'll delve a little bit deeper into that as we go on. I mean, tell us what an average week looks like for you. You've said the range of different companies that you work for and you broadcast for. So just talk us through maybe your next 5 to 7 days, what you've got what you've got in your diary.
Okay, yeah. Well, I've got a newborn baby, so that has changed everything quite dramatically. It used to be I could sort of just do my research for matches and all this whenever I wanted, and now that's very different. But on the whole, I'll sort of, for each football match I'd say 6 to 8 hours research probably, and that's just being sat at home in front of your laptop, nothing too glamorous. And I'll start work on a game, say 2 weeks in advance, or at least start putting the structure of the research together, because not a lot changes. Say I know I'm doing I'm doing Chelsea in a couple of weeks. Not a lot is, well, I say that about Chelsea, that's a bad example. A lot is changing at Chelsea, but say it's Arsenal. Not a lot's going to happen at Arsenal in the next 2 weeks. They'll play a couple of games, so I can already start my prep for that. So, but before I jumped on this call with you, Gareth, I was researching Newcastle and Brighton. So just putting the finishing touches on that work because I'm commentating on that game on Saturday. And then probably I'll get that done today. And then tomorrow I'll watch the press conferences. I'll watch Eddie Howe's, he's the Newcastle manager, and I watch Graham Potter's press conference, the Brighton manager, get the final details I need for that game, and then leave it alone until Saturday when I do the game. And I'll then start tomorrow doing a bit more on Spurs Everton, which is Monday. So I'm doing that on Monday. I only need to do a little bit of work for that because I've done lots of Spurs, obviously. I do every game. And I did Everton very recently. So it's a case of just topping up my notes where and when I can. Fly out to Ireland, do the Newcastle game from a TV studio in Ireland, rather than be at the game on Saturday. Fly back Saturday night. Sunday, I've just got completely off, day with the family. Monday, prep before, then go to Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and do Spurs Everton on the Monday night. That's Monday Night Football. And then on Tuesday and Wednesday, the morning of both those days, I'll do prep because it's Champions League nights and I'm hosting the Champions League radio show both nights. So I'll do my prep in the morning and then drive off to the studio out in West London on Tuesday and Wednesday. And then I think that's it. But then even by the time I get to Thursday, so then Thursday comes around and I'll probably start my research for the next weekend's round of games. So you're just trying to stay on top of it so it doesn't get too late in the day. You've got a game tomorrow and you haven't read anything. You know, it's a worst case scenario. I like to be really informed, know what's going on, and it also makes you feel extremely comfortable as a broadcaster when you feel like you know what the story is of what's happening.
Yeah, and how much notice do you get of which games you're going to be covering?
So basically, with Spurs, I have a contract with Spurs. They're the only people I really have a set contract with. I'm still freelance, but I have a contract with Spurs to work for them every day. So as soon as Spurs announce their fixtures, I can boom, put that in the diary, which is normally the Premier League announce them 4 to 6 weeks in advance. And then once I know that, I'll get in touch with my other clients, which are Premier Sports and the Bundesliga. The Champions League's already set. We know when the Champions League dates are. They don't change really. And then I'll get in touch with them and say, I'm free this day, this day, this day. And Premier Sports predominantly will take me every Saturday. I'm free when Spurs don't play. And then the Bundesliga might take me on the odd other one. And then if I've still got 3 days in the diary that I think, I could probably work there, I could fit in another game, I'll speak to a couple of production companies I know they might cover the Eredivisie or the Swedish league, loads of random leagues, foreign leagues, and they might have something for me. So it's a lot of networking. That's a big thing in my industry as well. You need to have loads of contacts. So that's how I fill my diary really.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, it sounds pretty full. Just explain to us then the concept of commentating, but not doing it from the stadium. So you said you often do it from the studio. So how does that work?
Yeah. So forgive me if I get too inside industry here with this bit, but a lot of TV commentary that you'll see, especially games in foreign countries with English commentary, they almost certainly won't be at the stadium. They'll be in a studio. It might be out in BT's studio in Stratford. It might be a huge studio called IMG in West London, which I'd be surprised if anyone's heard of on this call. But they're a huge company, IMG Media. If you want to look them up, they facilitate a lot of the live coverage of loads of football you watch, Premier League football included. So you'll go to a studio and you'll be in a soundproof booth. You might have a co-commentator with you, and then it's just a case of you've got a gallery on the other side of the glass. You'll have your producer or director, sound engineer, and then they'll just tell you when you're live. You'll get a cue in your headphones. They go, say, going live in 10, 9, 8, 6, 5, which used to give me a little heart attack, actually, Gareth, like having that countdown. But now I like it and feel quite comfortable with it. And then you go live. And then you don't, there's very specific rules about what you do and don't say off tube. It's called off tube when you do it from a studio, you're not actually there. And if you're off tube, you cannot pretend you're there. The Ofcom, who are the sort of broadcasting regulating body in this country, changed the law way back because people used to say, here at the Bernabeu, you know, and they were in some bunker in southwest London or something. You know, what a chilly day, you know, up here in Finland or whatever. You can't do that anymore. But you don't say you're not there. So you just leave it in this sort of ambiguous space where you just say, what a great atmosphere at the Emirates, you know, blah, 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 or what an unbelievable goal, Stamford Bridge is rocking. You're not saying you're not there. You're not saying you are there. It's just semantics, not to blur the audience's reality of what's happening, but it actually isn't entirely necessary. You can sometimes be caught out. I did get caught out for a game a couple of weeks ago where a goal we didn't know, and none of us in the gallery or me as the commentator knew that a goal had been disallowed. So a goal had gone in, we'd seen the replays. When the replays end, the ball's back in play. So you presume they've kicked off. It said 3-0 still in the top. And then my producer just panicked and pressed the button and said, I've just heard disallowed, it's been disallowed, because we didn't know, because we're not there. So it makes it a little bit risky, but I think fundamentally for production companies as well, it's a bit cheaper. So I still get to go to lots of football, but lots of TV will be in the controlled environment of a production facility or soundproof booth or something like that. Sorry to shatter the illusion for anyone who thought we were always there.
Yeah, no, there may well be some questions that people want to know for that. I can see that there are questions coming through already, so do keep those coming in. We'll try and get through to all of them as we go through. So, Rob, it sounds like a really, really enjoyable job. If there's one thing that you said was the thing that is the most enjoyable aspect of your role, though, what would you say that was?
It would definitely be being live at live sports, and particularly what I do. I mean, you know, written journalists, you know, there'll be a packed press, you know, at any football stadium, there's a press box, and there might be, say, 40 people from the written media, and you'd know this, Gareth, having been down at Spurs many times, there'll probably be about 40 people up in the broadcasting part as well. Yeah. But when you're broadcasting, when you're commentating, you're so in it, you're so in the live moment that I love the thrill of when a goal goes in and trying to capture the moment. Try and capture the moment correctly. Commentary is an interesting thing because someone wants to watch something and they just have to watch it with you. They don't have a choice. You know, the viewer doesn't get to, they can mute it, but you'd lose the crowd effects. So if you're the commentator for someone, you're sort of there. It's like sitting next to someone in a pub and talking at them the whole time they're watching a game. They didn't choose for you to sit next to them. So you have to handle it in a way, the job in a way whereby you're not too intrusive, you're being informative, you're being a warm presence that they like being around, while also when a goal goes in, getting really excited because people are, you know, in this country extremely passionate about football. So live football, Gareth, when a goal goes in, that's the most fun, probably.
And then flip side of it, what's the challenging aspects of the role that perhaps people wouldn't appreciate?
Getting stick on Twitter. Sometimes it's, you know, a bit of that. Yeah, you have to sort of, sometimes you will read something a bit mean about yourself, but I used to hate that a lot, and now I don't really mind too much. You know, if I had woke up one morning and had 500 tweets saying I was rubbish, that would be horrible. But from a personal point of view, it's the uncertainty. You're freelance, so you're trying to get work and you're trying to manage all these clients and everything. It's a bit tricky. And also you work weekends when all your friends are free. You know, I've probably missed a lot of birthday parties and great things with my friends because of working weekends and evenings. That's when football is. But it was a, you know, say sacrifice. It's not the most, you know, unbelievable sacrifice to make in the world, but you do have to sacrifice a lot of time where other people are free. That is a sacrifice of working in this industry. But if you love football, you might well be at football anyway, you know, on a Saturday or Sunday, so you don't mind that someone's paying you to be there or working on it. And yeah, but I'd say that, Gareth, to be honest, you know, not being you know, working unusual hours is less favourable, isn't it, really?
Yeah. One thing I'm just interested to touch on there, you spoke about being a freelance. So that's possibly something that not many people will understand, particularly, you know, you're sort of 15, 16, 17. So what's the concept of being freelance, and how does that compare to perhaps being salaried, where you've got a job, you work for one company?
Yeah, so if you've got a salary and a regular job, you're probably something close to 9 to 5 or 10 to 6, Monday to Friday. And I know the the parameters for where you work and when you work are changing slightly, especially since COVID. I understand that, but that's where you've got your set salary. You know it's coming in every month. You got your pension. You might even have a health plan or whatever, and you know exactly when you work. You don't even need to look at the diary. You've got your 20 days holiday a year, and you book it off like that. For me, I've been freelance ever since I left university in 2008, so nearly 14 years now. And that is where you run your own diary. You don't have a boss in essence. You are your own boss, but you do have clients. So when I started out, Gareth, and I left uni in 2008, it was a case of, right, I had a CV which had very little on it, and I had a show reel of me reading news bulletins, and I just emailed that to every news editor in East Anglia. So I was working in, like, I know we're all like Hertfordshire here, but I did actually work at Harlow, which it was 1017 was the radio station. I don't think it's there anymore, but that covered a bit of Hertfordshire and Essex. It was like a weird, unusual sort of cross-county patch. So I worked there, and Essex FM, and SGI Ipswich, and KMFM in Kent, and Broadland in Norwich, and then all the BBC. I worked BBC Norfolk, BBC Kent. I just worked around. So it was a case of building that network of people, because you need to pester people for work. You're chasing work all the time, basically, when you're freelance. If you get into a position whereby you've got a really good contract, you might be freelance but have a contract with Sky. You might have 100 games a year locked in, and that's a great position to be in. You're still technically freelance, but you've got that solid contract. And I sort of do with Tottenham that. I've got like a guaranteed 50, 60 games a year, including friendlies and all the cups. And then I can build around that. But being freelancers, you're in charge of it yourself. You submit your own tax return. You'll likely have an accountant do it, because I've tried to do it myself and it's a bit messy. But you do all that stuff yourself, and you pick when you go on holiday, when you don't go on holiday. But by the same token, you could have a period of a month where you don't have any work, because that's the risk of freelance life. And certainly when COVID hit, in March 2020, a lot of people were being furloughed, whereby the government was paying companies to pay wages, even though people couldn't work. That didn't happen to me. I just lost all my work overnight, and then for 3 months didn't earn any money. So it's a precarious thing, but freelancers can be paid a bit more than people who are staffers doing a specific job. So it's all weighing it up. But ultimately, I love freelance life. I've only really known it. If Sky Sports came to me tomorrow and said, we want to put you on a contract, we'll give you a job, and you have 100 games a year, that'd be great. But that just doesn't happen at this level of the industry, really.
Sure. Okay. Again, if you've got any questions specifically about freelancing and sort of contract status, then drop that into the dashboard. So there are a number of questions that are still coming through. Just want to talk now, Rob, about how you and how someone else might take the next steps to get into sports broadcasting. So first of all, just tell us about your A-level selection. And I know I'm asking you something here that you can't remember very well, but talk to us about your A-levels, what you think you did, and more particularly the degree that you went to.
Well, to think back, what's crazy is you think back to those exam times. I know a lot of people watching will be going through it now, how it is a bit traumatic and how nerve-wracking it is, and exams, and how you get caught up on the grades and everything. I can't remember all my GCSEs, and I definitely can't remember one of my A-levels. I know one of my A-levels, I did, I know I did chemistry and geography, I did general studies, and I think the other one was English, I think. I remember the grades, because that got me into uni, which is really bad. I mean, it's not that long ago, 18 years ago, I should remember. But all that mattered was that I had the grades to go do broadcast journalism at Leeds University. So you needed 3 Bs, which I got ABB, and then I did a broadcast journalism degree for 3 years. And then off the back of that, had really good training, and it's one of the best journalism degrees and courses in the country. And then I was ready to go into the industry. You don't have to go to university, and university is a lot more expensive than when I went. It was about £1,000 a year or £1,000 a term, I think, back then. So it was a lot cheaper. But you can do short courses, 3, 6, 9 months. I'm not sure. But I remember certainly when I was going to uni, people were saying, well, why don't you just do a short course and get your NCTJ, which is a qualification, or your BCTJ, and then you can just go start working straight away. But I really wanted to go to uni at the time, and it didn't cost anywhere near what it does now. So you don't have to go to uni to get into this industry. You can go and get, I would strongly recommend getting a journalism qualification of some kind, because you'll be an extremely valuable person anywhere you work. And you need to know some legal things, what you can and can't say on air, what your presenter can and can't say on air, because you can get into real trouble with things like defamation and getting sued and getting court cases thrown out. There's a myriad of things that you have to be careful about. So if anyone did want to get into it, I'd say go to uni, do a course, or get a journalism qualification from somewhere, and then hit the work experience, hit the emails, and try that way.
Yeah. Okay. Now, just thinking about your A levels that you did, or that you think you did anyway. You know you did chemistry. I mean, they don't sound like obvious subjects that someone who would go into sports broadcasting would need. So, did you change the desired career route after you'd chosen your A levels?
Yeah. So I thought I was going to go into dentistry was the plan, and then because I did okay at GCSE, and then started doing A levels, and I wasn't enjoying chemistry, which is a big part of going into dentistry anyway. And then I realized I actually didn't know what I wanted to do at all. And when I was a kid, I did want to be a commentator. It was like a running joke when I was a kid. So I thought, well, maybe I could be a journalist. Maybe I could be a news journalist. I loved the news. And I was, as I mentioned before, I was a news journalist for about 6-7 years in the end. So I decided, I'm not going to go to uni. I'm in the fortunate position whereby my parents are going to let me live at home for a year. And I'm going to do part-time work, earn a bit of money. That will help me at uni, and do work experience, hopefully at a newspaper or radio station or something. And radio stations let me in. And once one radio station let me in to do work experience, I wasn't getting paid, but I was in there making coffees. And then they'd say, actually, we need someone to go interview this MP in the middle of Colchester. Will you go do it? So I'd go do it, come back. They'd give me feedback. So it was a really positive experience. And then probably about a week into that work experience life, in my year out, I knew I wanted to do it. So then I had my grades already, because I'd done my levels already. I knew exactly where I was, and then I applied for a series of courses that I thought would be good, and then Leeds let me in, and that's how I got into that. So yeah, you're right, Gareth, I did change my mind pretty late in the day, because you don't need a chemistry A level to do football commentary, funnily enough.
No. There's a question that's just come in. I'm going to drop it in now because it feels really relevant, particularly with the imagery we've got on the screen at the moment. So historically, sports broadcasting was almost exclusively male orientated. So certainly when you and I were growing up, Rob, the only male voices we would have heard talking about football would have been males. On the screen there, that's Robin Cowan, who's one of the Match of the Day presenters. Yep. So we've had a question here: is that how accessible is the industry for females? And have you noticed from the time that you've been in it that there's big changes going on?
No, absolutely. And I'd say in the last 2 or 3 years, there was another leap anyway. I would say I'd say it's a very good time for women to get into the industry, an extremely good time. There's lots of opportunities. People want women on it. People want to see women on air. People want to hear women on air, and it's been a really nice, because now actually I find it a bit jarring when you watch coverage and it's all men. It feels imbalanced. It feels a bit unusual now because you're so used to seeing women in presenter roles or commentator roles. Robin's one of two female commentators on Match of the Day, I think, and on live BBC TV coverage. My wife Cheryl, who now is a documentary maker, she was a producer on a Louis Theroux one recently and all this, but previously she worked at Sky Sports News. So my Cheryl was a producer at Sky Sports News for about 5 years, and she was one of a very small number of women working there at the time. But now there's lots of women in the industry, so it's a great time, and I'd hope no one would feel intimidated about trying to get into it, because it feels different. It feels extremely open, and it's a good time for it, I think.
Yeah, good. Okay. Just sort of changing course slightly, thinking about subjects that you need. As we'll say to everyone, if you're thinking about going to university, the best advice to you is to have a look at the UCAS website, have a look at individual universities, and just double check what their entry grades are that they need. From looking at UCAS, it suggested that BBC is probably sort of about the level that you'd need to get into a broadcast journalism role. Just taking it back a few steps beforehand, though, Rob. I mean, clearly English at GCSE level is going to be important. How would you rate your language skills? Have they always been strong? And do you think that's absolutely an essential part? I mean, thinking about vocabulary and grammar and sentence construction.
I would say so. I'd say it's very important, and you need to, certainly with what I do specifically, you need to find different ways of saying the same thing over and over again. You need to have good vocabulary. You need to know how to change things up. You need to know how to avoid horrible cliches. You need to be able to quickly form sentences on the spot that are coherent and clear and everything like that. So I think everything I did in terms of English, and I was always a big fan of English, was actually really important for me. And especially if you want to, say you don't want to even get into the broadcasting side of this industry, if you want to get into the written side of it, you have to know that stuff. You just simply have to know that stuff. I'd be amazed if, I don't know specifically, but how many, written journalism courses and that would take people who don't have a good grasping of English, and people in any professional, in terms of English, any professional work environment wants someone who knows how to construct an email and express ideas clearly and that kind of thing. So I'd say it was really important for me, and has helped me in my job now.
Yeah. Okay. We've spoken about some of the qualifications that you might need to get into the industry. I mean, just sort of fairly concisely, we have touched on this already, but what are the sorts of skills and qualities that you feel a really good sports broadcaster needs?
I think you need to be diligent. I mean, fundamentally, all these jobs, whether you're an editor or you're a producer or a director or a commentator, you're being a journalist. I really believe this. At the core of anything is being a journalist, and being a journalist is about us understanding what's important. It's about being editorial with decisions. So you could say you're a cameraman and something happens. You need to use your journalist brain, like what's the story here, to pan the camera to the right place. If you're the commentator, you need to know the story to say the right thing. So fundamentally, I think in all these jobs that would not be classed as journalists, the best people at them have journalist instincts and understandings, and that comes from diligent researching and being able to understand ideas clearly and quickly. I'll give a brief example in terms of my job specifically and being a journalist. Say a goal goes in, and when a goal goes in, there's a myriad of things you could say. So you could say, take if there's any football fans watching, Leeds Spurs, and it's 3-0, and then Spurs score for 4-0, and Harry Kane, the England captain, plays a long ball forward, and Heung-min Son scores. Now, in that moment, there's a lot of things you could say immediately after the goal. You could say, it's 4-0, the game's dead. Wow, what an unbelievable goal, because it was an unbelievable goal. You could say, that's Heung-min Son's 10th Premier League goal of the season, because it was his 10th Premier League goal of the season. So you have all these pieces of information. You could even say, oh, this might be the end of Marcelo Bielsa as Leeds manager, because it was another defeat. He looked in real trouble. It killed the game. You could go big on something like that. But the story of that goal was that Harry Kane and Heung-min Son set a new Premier League record for setting each other up for goals. So in that moment, you as a journalist are going through all these pieces of information, but putting one to the top. And that's a bit like writing a headline. You're trying to find what's the most clear, concise way to express the most important piece of information. Now, say it's a last-minute winner. Say it was 2-2 and Kane and Son score, do the same thing. I might not mention the stat about them breaking that Premier League record, because the most important thing is it's a last-minute winner. So in any of these things, you're essentially a journalist, and knowing the story, doing your research is what's most important.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds a good point. Before we go on to take the questions that are coming in, so there are a number of questions that are coming in. You're not too late. You got something you want to ask Rob? If anything that he's mentioned so far, you want to know a little bit more about?
Come
Do
on,
drop it in
don't
to the
leave me
questions.
hanging at the end here.
We've got, there's plenty, don't worry about that. Just want to know that, you know, the prospects for being a football commentator. So if you take match of the day on a Saturday, that's maybe maybe 6 or 7 games on average on a Saturday, so that needs 7 commentators. I mean, just try and scale this up for us a little bit, Rob. How many football commentators are needed on an average weekend across all the media platforms?
That's hard, mate. I'd say, well, in terms of, if you literally went Sky, BBC, BT, you probably get to about 25 maybe of the Premier League games, and some people might do a couple. So at the top of the end of the industry, it's pretty slim. There's not many jobs. There probably would be, I'd say there are about 3 or 4. There's like different tiers. There's probably about 3, 4, 5 top level commentators that you'd know if you like football, like Martin Tyler and Guy Mowbray, who's the BBC guy, and Steve Wilson, who's the other BBC guy, and Rob Hawthorne, who's the other Sky guy, and Darren Fleck. You know, those guys are at the top. And then there's a sort of pyramid down of, then there'll probably be another bracket of all the other guys who do the Sky games that are not live, but they show later in the evening. There's like another level. And then below that, there's the guys who want to get up to that level. So, which is probably what I'm on. You know, I'm probably on that level below that, wanting to work for a TV channel in this country. But there, if you think about Match of the Day has loads of commentators, Sky needs commentators, BT needs commentators, the Premier League need commentators, Soccer Saturday have guys at basically, I don't know, 15, 20 games. Every single BBC local radio station will cover their team, so they'll have commentary teams there. You also have updates on BT, so BT have reporters at loads of different games, including non-league. Then there's all the football leagues, so there's 3 tiers of football league, and Sky cover the Championship, League 1 and League 2. BT show non-league, so the tier below that. Then there's all the foreign leagues. There's the German that I work on. There's Serie A, that's 10 games. Bundesliga's 10 games. Eredivisie, you know, they cover 4 games in English. La Liga, they've got their own channel now. So there is a lot, actually, Gareth. You know, when you actually get to it, you know, we can talk about the TV top end, but then there's loads of local radio and great commentators in that level as well.
Yeah, and of course we're just talking about football. There's a whole host of other sports, and there's what the Paralympics started today as well. So that's another.
Exactly. If you know your if you know a niche sport as well, it really helps you in this industry. If you know something about squash or swimming or these things that wouldn't be, you know, at the forefront of the average sports fan's mind, but you can know a lot about it, you'll impress someone in a newsroom if you're in a sports newsroom and you know that kind of thing, because they'll just think, oh, you know, Lucy knows about swimming, or Gary really knows his bowls. You know, it might be stuff like that that gets you into commentary in different ways, you know, in a team. But of course, this country, it's just weekends are live, wall-to-wall live sport, isn't it? There's so much out there. Yeah. There's rugby union, rugby league, golf, tennis, cricket. I mean, it's endless. So hopefully people realise there are lots of opportunities out there.
Yeah. Well, in fact, I mean, there's a question specifically for you about, could you cover any other sports?
I did do tennis briefly. So tennis would probably be my closest to doing another sport. But to be honest, I'm aware of the specifics of every sport. Even football, which seems like the broadest, most open, accessible sport, is at it really unbelievably nuanced and niched. And yes, I could probably, if someone showed me the rules of basketball and said, you've got a week to swat up and then cover this Euro League, you know, kind of game or whatever, I could do a job. You know, he passes to X, blah, 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 and he scores, and that's 3 points or it's 2 points. But it wouldn't feel comfortable. It would feel a bit unusual, to be honest. But you especially at the start, you'll do anything. You'll try anything. Yeah. I like to think I know cricket, but cricket is so nuanced and tricky that I'd be utterly terrified if someone said you have to comment on an hour's worth of cricket. I would fold in like a deck chair.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I mean, I probably, like many other people, if you're sports watchers, it may have been you as well, but we're suddenly drawn into watching the curling at the Winter Olympics a couple of weeks ago when Team GB got into the women's final. And I don't suppose, you know who the commentator was, but is that likely to be a curling expert who comes out once every 4 years to commentate, or?
That might be, yeah, that's a good question. That might be, it's a mix. It's a mix. It might be someone who does cover it all the time and really knows their stuff, or it can be someone that the Olympics know can do a job on it. That might literally be it. Like I was speaking to one football commentator I worked with the other day, and he says he does the luge. So he's a football commentator on Sky, but during the Olympics, he works on the Winter Olympics. He worked on that. I was like, how on earth do you know? And he goes, well, you understand the basics and you remember some of the names and you do your research and you can just do a solid job on it. Just sort of get through, explain the simple stuff, keep it nice and simple. After that time, that's actually what people want when they're watching anyway. They don't want you overloading them with stats and anecdotes and everything. They just want to enjoy it and to be told the things that might be a little bit ambiguous and confusing, just explain to them clearly.
Sure. Okay. And then, look, final question I'm going to ask before we really get stuck into the ones that have been submitted is, what are the other areas that someone in sports broadcasting might go to? So are there any alternative career routes that you maybe your peers find that you might go into?
What you mean from sports broadcasting and then going elsewhere? Yeah, definitely. You could definitely end up behind as part of media teams. I think that's or ending up in PR, communications, these kind of roles where you're, as a broadcaster, you're on one side of it. Maybe you're covering a team or a league, and maybe you can flip over and go to the other side. You might go into PR for a club or a league or a TV channel or for a brand associated with that sport and that kind of thing. So there is crossover there. You could go into news journalism, like my wife Cheryl. You could switch from being a sports journalist to a news journalist to being a documentary producer, which is what she's done. She went from Sky Sports News to Sky News to making documentaries. So it isn't just like you end up in that industry and it's sort of you're stuck there. You can deviate into other positions, and sports broadcasting doesn't pay you unbelievable money unless you get right to the top. So you might get to a point where you think I'd like to earn a bit more money, and then in communications, media, the media management side of things, you probably will earn a bit more money. But yeah, you definitely can branch out into other things from it.
Sure. Okay. Right, I'm going to go over to the questions that we've got in here. And this is sort of a double up question, really. This is from Roberto. If I'm doing a sports journalism course at uni, how quickly after the 3 years can I get into working for a company? Is it purely dependent on your networks?
The networking is important, yeah. I think so. And you never know, you might be lucky that one of your lecturers might actually have an in for you somewhere. They might, they've likely worked in the industry. They might be able to help you get in somewhere and say, if you've impressed them, you say, do you mind asking, I want a bit of work experience. You used to work at 5 Live on, the Stephen Nolan show or something. Do you think I could get a week's worth of work experience and going in like that? It is hard to go into the industry without having done it with a CV and say, can you give me a job? But if you're willing to do things like being a runner, as I mentioned earlier in the show, so a runner being someone who helps print scripts and might chip in and help edit the odd thing, but is mainly doing, more simple tasks that aren't specifically about the broadcast or whatever, then eventually you'll bump up the ladder. That's what my wife did at Sky Sports News. She was a runner, and then she was an assistant producer, then she was a producer producing live stuff on Sky Sports News and that kind of thing. So that's a common route. It's hard to go in and, leave uni and you're a commentator within 6 months, a year. That seems quite hard. And the industry has changed dramatically from when I left, where there were loads of local radio stations, where there were loads of opportunities. Most of them have been shut down now. Many of them shut down before you were even born, to be honest. But, still with BBC local radio, there are opportunities there. So, you might find it tough when you first come out and people are not willing to give you a chance. But if you're earning money in other ways and plugging away and getting work experience, then eventually people go, oh, she was really useful, actually. Maybe we could give her a shift doing this, or he really knew his way around that. We'll give him a shift doing Y. And then you're in. And then once you're in, you can come up the ladder a bit.
Yeah. Okay. So what about podcasting? How useful is that to gain experience broadcasting?
Brilliant. I mean, I'm a huge podcast fan anyway. I think what I would say to anyone about podcasting, and certainly as well with the use of social media, I'm very wary with how much time people are willing to invest in social media and building a profile when you could actually just be trying to get better. But with podcasting, if you're going into making a podcast, say you want to make a podcast, say you're a big Spurs fan and you think I'd love to make a Spurs podcast where me and a couple of mates who are really passionate want to talk about football, great. Do that because it's brilliant experience. Don't do it because you think maybe it'll be our big break and someone will hear the podcast and that will get us in somewhere. Use it as experience, but fundamentally use any of those things to get better, not necessarily as a direct opportunity. But I think podcasting, because it's quite simple. You can have a microphone or an iPhone in the middle of three of you and talk. Then you might upgrade and buy a couple of mics and learn how to use Adobe Audition, which is editing software. I think anything, as long as you are trying to improve, everything is worthwhile. And I think things like doing student radio, a huge fan of student radio. I did student radio. It was as valuable to me as my course, for sure. Doing student radio, doing work experience, making your own stuff, making podcasts or bits of voiceover or commentary and sending it to people in the industry and just saying, what do you think? Getting feedback, improving is really important. So if you want to set a podcast up with your friends, if it does go nuclear and you suddenly become famous and you're number one on the Apple charts, great, but it's extremely difficult. Podcasts is the most saturated market around, but it's really good for getting better.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke there about listening back and using it to improve. How conscious were you when you first started about listening to your voice? Because lots of people, they really don't like that.
Yeah, no, I didn't either. It's sort of an eye opener, really, when you hear yourself talking. You're like, that is how everyone must hate me, because my voice is the most annoying thing in the world. That's what everyone, I think, when they first hear their voice thinks. But you do get used to it, and also in terms of your broadcast voice, you do alter it. You might shave off a little bit of your accent so that you're a little bit clearer to understand. You learn, certainly I have anyway, from really good news editors down the years, how to slow down and speed up your voice and when to breathe so you express things clearly. And then when you start to hear your voice take shape, you don't hate it as much anymore. Believe me, there's still times when I hear it and I think, this guy, dearie me, so annoying. But people book me, so it's probably fine. It's probably fine, isn't it?
Yeah. So look, Roberto, I hope that answers your question. I know you had a follow-up one that I hope we probably covered in there as well. Anything else you want to clarify, do drop that in now as well, so we can make sure we answer that. Just talking, I'm interested about pronunciations, Ron, and how you cope with that. So I mean, I'm looking at this database that's available on the website that tells me all the games you've commentated on, indeed all your other commentators. So I can see that fairly recently you covered a game between Georgia and Uzbekistan. So
Yeah.
Apart from the fact that you needed to do a lot of research, because these would have been presumably players that you weren't too familiar with, there would have been some challenges around pronouncing players' names. So how do you cope with that, or what's your tactics that you adopt?
Well, you learn there were some things in terms of covering, different leagues in different countries. There are some rules you learn about the way they pronounce certain words. So I'm not a linguist. I don't speak other languages. I've got a tiny bit of German, but that's it. But you learn certain things that in certain ways people say words, and say Southampton have got a left back called Perraud, Perraud. I didn't actually need to look up that you didn't call him Perraud, or however that looks. You know that a French name would do that, so you would presume it's Perraud. You might double check it, but you'd be in pretty safe territory. But say with the Georgian and the Uzbekistan names, that was a case of, right, I've got 25 names. I need to sit down for a couple of hours and try and find whatever I can on the internet on how to pronounce their names. Some websites, people upload pronunciations so you get them correct. There's a website called Forvo where you can put in a name and you can find the correct pronunciation for it. You might go through old YouTube highlights. Say it's like Dynamo Minsk. There's a player for Dynamo Minsk. You go on their YouTube channel, you watch their highlights, you know their player scores at 8 minutes, you watch and you listen, and you hear roughly what you think that name should sound like, and you write it down phonetically. And then when you're really getting into the weeds, say it's a name in Cyrillic, like a Russian word would be in, you copy that into Google, and then you try and find videos with the Cyrillic. So you can't read any of it because you don't speak Russian or whatever it might be, but you can find someone saying the name somewhere. That is a boring part of the job. That is quite dull, but very satisfying when you work it out.
Yeah, okay. This is a slightly mischievous question here, Rob, but have you ever said anything that you've regretted afterwards when you've heard it back?
Yeah, like every game, probably every game, probably every game. I mean, you end up, you know, you're talking live for an hour and a half. You're gonna say something a bit unusual, and just think, why did I say that? It happens all the time, and it can, sometimes you'll say something and it will stay with you for 10 minutes. And you're just thinking, like a defender scoring an own goal, where you just you need to forget it. You can't forget it. It's still just rumbling around in your head. I'm trying to think if there's anything. I haven't done any major horrific gaffes. I don't think. I'm trying to think, but I do say stuff all the time where I'll say it and then go, "What was that? What was that?" Yeah, that actually happens a lot more than people would think, probably.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever got anything sort of factually incorrect? I mean, you mentioned the time where you were off tube where through no fault of your own you couldn't actually see that the goal had been disallowed. But has anything happened where you've credited the goal with the wrong goal scorer? And
Yeah, you have things like that where you learn how to deal with those. You try and if you're unsure about who scored a certain goal, you try and be as ambiguous as you can without committing. You sort of learn that from earlier mistakes where you say that player scored blah blah blah, and then you see the replay and actually another player gets a little touch on the way in or whatever it might be. So you learn how to ambiguously get your way around it. But sometimes you just have these sort of brain fart kind of moments where you just say the wrong thing that you didn't mean to. I mean, I will always check back like the short highlights of every game I do if there's a short version up, just to make sure everything I said was fine. And even the Leeds Spurs game, I think this is right. It was 2-0. Leeds hit the post, and I said they nearly got the equaliser, which is obviously incorrect. But sometimes these things just fall out. You just say the wrong thing, and sometimes if it needs fixing, you just be honest and tell someone and say you need to cut that out when you make the highlights. And sometimes you just need to let it go. These things.
yeah.
These things happen. I mean, I'm sure I'll have a horrific one where I'll say this player scored and then they'll do the close up and it's someone completely different. But touch wood, it hasn't happened too many times yet.
Good. Okay. And another question I think is a really good one to ask as well. Do you ever stutter or does your throat close up, and how quickly can you brush over that?
Yeah, and I used to have something bordering on like a panic attack kind of thing when I used to read out the text on this radio show in East London for West Ham. So there'd be two presenters, and then they go, Rob's answering the phones, he's got the text, and then they put my mic up, and 18-year-old me would be like, Kenny from Dagenham has said, whatever it might be. And one time my voice just stopped halfway through a sentence, and I couldn't breathe properly, and then they just had to pick up. It was quite mortifying. So sometimes when you get really nervous, you do have these things. And I remember doing a thing on CNN, the news channel, about 5 or 6 years ago, and I did watch it back to see what had happened. But I remember thinking, oh, this is a big deal. I'm on CNN, like this is a big news channel. So the cameras on me, and they're asking me questions, and I'm just answering down the line live from London. And I remember just the realizing that this was real just sort of hit me, and I just almost nearly stopped talking. I could nearly just live on this CNN channel just stopped, but I watched it back, so I was like, I wonder what happened there. And you can see me recover and save it, but I did nearly stop talking. So you do stutter and stumble and these kind of things, but as long as you don't make too big a deal out of it, it's a bit like when you're broadcasting, people just want to feel like you're in control. They don't want to feel like someone who's nervous and doesn't really know what they're doing is on their football commentary. So if you do mess up, just address it and go, oh, I see Harry Kane's come off. Oh, sorry, Tim Min's on. Blah, 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 bat on. Just don't worry about it. So lots of mortifyingly embarrassing things happen when you do this job, but you just have to work out how to, Men in Black erase them. You know what I
mean? Yeah. Another question here. When you're commentating, do you have a producer talking to you in your ear, and is that distracting?
Sometimes you can, yeah. So if you're doing, for a lot of my stuff, it's very simple. You'll already be getting the pictures. You're not in control of the director isn't changing the pictures. It's all quite simple. But you might have a producer feeding you stats or letting you know while you're talking that a substitution's coming or something. And when I host the Champions League radio show, I could be talking for 30 seconds, and someone could be talking to me that whole time, telling me new piece of information. So almost what you're saying is this automated, you are removed from that and you're listening, really. So you're saying this quite, we need to go to Borussia Dortmund next, there's been a goal, blah, 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 but you're not even thinking about what you're saying, you're just saying it. And then you're listening to what the person is saying. So you build up these weird multitasking kind of skills, which you can tune in and out of. So that's something that's just sort of happened.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a good.
At first, it's unbelievably distracting. Yeah, really hard.
I'm sure that, yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to know the techniques for that. I mean, full disclosure here, midway through this webinar, I had the cleaner come in and collect the bin from me, which put me right off with my sentence. But are there any techniques you could share? Because I mean, I dare say those multitasking techniques would be useful for many of us in many situations.
I wish I knew. It becomes just getting comfortable with the role and understanding how to deal with certain things. So say a producer needs to tell me something really important, I know to just keep things really simple so that I don't say something mad, and then I can just listen to the information. And you slow down how you talk, maybe not so much that a listener would be like, is he okay? But maybe where it just sounds like you're trying to be really clear, and that just buys you the bit of time to hear what the person's saying. I mean, lots of jobs involve hearing lots of pieces of information at once and trying to process it. But I wish I had. That's just practice. I used to be rubbish at it, and then I've just got better at it, and I'm still not perfect, because I'll be doing my automated talking, listening to the producer, and then we'll be play a clip, and the producer will go, "You said the wrong score." I'll be like, "Oh, that was in automated mode. The wrong thing came out." So these things happen.
Yeah. Okay. And then I think this is going to be the final question, because it's the last one I can see, and I think it's a really, really good one to ask. So, why did you choose to do your degree at Leeds? What was it about that particular course that you liked? And can you tell us some of the modules that you learned when you're doing it?
Yeah, I'd heard really good things about Leeds as a city anyway. At the time, there were two really good courses in the country at university, and that was Sheffield and Leeds. Sheffield was more of a written course, Leeds was broadcasting. And despite having the grades, for some reason, I didn't get into Sheffield. I don't know what happened, but they didn't accept me. So Leeds did, but it was a blessing, really, because actually when I did my work experience, it was all in radio and TV. So by the time I got there, we did things like, you're in a newsroom, you're shown how to use news editing equipment and software. We had camera courses, we had legal stuff that was really important. We even had like the history of politics, really, to just give us a base understanding of the political world, because politics isn't everything. As we're finding out with what's happening with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the effects of politics simmering goes through everything, including sport. It's massively affecting the world of sport in a myriad of ways. So camera work, presenting, news reading, editing, we had loads of stuff. It was really fun, really hands-on, and it was a good base coupled with student radio, because it was like theory. The uni was theory, and then the student radio was practical. The practical implication and use of the stuff we were learning. So the two of them together was what was really helpful.
Yeah. Okay. And just remind us the title of your course. Was it Sports Broadcasting and Journalism, or have I got that the wrong way?
No, it's just broadcast journalism, I think, and I think it's still the same. And when I went back recently, a couple of years ago, to do a talk, the facilities were mind-blowing. They're unbelievable. So there, Nottingham Trent, I think is really good. I think there's one down in Bournemouth. I think there's something at Wembley as well. I'm not incredibly clued up on the courses knocking around now, but there's plenty out there. And if you don't want to go to university, you can do one of those short form, get your qualification. I think you can even do part-time courses so that you feel qualified, so you have a legal understanding of journalism.
Yeah. Okay. Now I'm on UCAS website at the moment, which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with, or you will be in the next few years anyway. And if you type in broadcast journalism there, it will bring up details of all the courses currently that are available. So there's a lot of even indirectly related ones. There are a lot of different courses out there, so do have a look. So Rob, I mean, just to clarify, your advice would be, if you can access a degree course, or you can go to university, you'll gain a lot from doing that. But it's not essential that you do.
No, I don't think so. Personally, I think there's a lot of value to going to university, and I loved it. But I think certainly if you're worried about the financial implications of going to university as well, then it's a good option to do one of these other courses, or try and get in on a trainee program with a company or something like that. There's many ways into the industry, and I'd hope no one feels daunted by the prospect of trying to get into it. There are ways in, and loads of different jobs and loads of different companies you've probably never heard of that have a load of jobs as well. So it is an accessible industry, and a fun one if you can get into it.
Yeah, so you mentioned earlier the NCTJ, which is the National Council for the Training of Journalists. I'm saying that looking at it on the screen there. And that website is nctj.com. So that may well be worth having a look at as well if you're interested, nctj.com. So do have a look at that. Okay, well, look, I think we've gone through all the questions, and we've just ticked over to the hour point as well. So it's probably a good point as any time to leave this now. You'll be going back to your preparations, Rob, for your weekend commentary, and then on Monday night as well.
I'm actually off to the pub, Gareth. I can't lie.
Are you off to the pub?
I'll be back at it. So I've done enough learning about Dan Burn and Newcastle United today. So it's time to clock off the day. It's 5:30.
That's right. I'm sure you'll be watching one of your peers in action. I know Everton are playing Boreham Wood, who make this Hertfordshire centric, are Hertfordshire's last team remaining in the FA Cup this season. So they
absolutely,
play
absolutely. Yeah, let's see what they can do. It'd be huge if they won. Huge.
It would be, wouldn't it? Yeah. So look, maybe for those of you watching this at the moment, whether football commentary is the area that you want to go into or not, maybe watch that game tonight and listen to the commentator, and just try and think back to some of the things that Rob's spoken about, and just try and piece together what that commentator's last, well, not just few hours, but last few weeks even would have looked like in preparation for that. So I think it is something that you can all get some form of exposure to by watching professionals or listening to professionals in action. So just before we go, on your screen at the moment, just a reminder, do have a look at the HOT website. That is a source of information about lots and lots of careers information specific to Hertfordshire. If you look at the QR code on your screen at the moment, that will take you to all of the previous webinars that we've recorded. So they cover a whole host of different careers and angles. There might be some that are related to you. We covered journalism probably about a year ago. So there may be some other ones on there that you want to have a look at as well. Also have a look at our social media handles. Thank you to everyone who has attended, particularly those of you that have come live to this session, have contributed and added your questions. But thanks most of all to Rob Daly for giving up his time this afternoon and sharing his thoughts and experiences with you. Rob, you've been a real star. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
No problem, Gareth. Thank you. And if anyone wants to get in touch with me, I'll always reply. Just be a journalist. You can find my email somewhere on the internet, find my website or something. I will always reply if you've got any questions.
Sure. Thanks ever so much. So thanks, everybody. Have a great evening and good night.